Let us begin with constitutions. This is a very important topic in government. It appears in your exams every single year. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the meaning of a constitution, the types of constitutions, the functions of a constitution, the sources of a constitution, and how to answer exam questions. Take your notes. Let us go. First, what is a constitution? A constitution is the fundamental law of a country. It sets out the basic principles, rules, and structures of government. It defines the powers of the different arms of government. It also defines the rights and duties of citizens. A constitution is the supreme law of the land. Every other law must be consistent with the constitution. If any law contradicts the constitution, that law is void. The constitution is the foundation upon which all other laws are built. Without a constitution, there would be no way to limit government power or protect citizen rights. A constitution can be written or unwritten. A written constitution is a single document or a set of documents that contains the fundamental laws. The United States and Nigeria have written constitutions. An unwritten constitution is not contained in a single document. It is found in statutes, judicial decisions, customs, and conventions. The United Kingdom has an unwritten constitution. However, most countries today have written constitutions. Now let me explain the types of constitutions. There are several ways to classify constitutions. The first classification is written and unwritten. A written constitution is codified in a single document. It is deliberate and planned. An unwritten constitution is not codified. It evolves over time. The second classification is rigid and flexible. A rigid constitution is difficult to amend. It requires a special procedure, such as a supermajority vote in the legislature or a referendum. Nigeria's constitution is rigid. Amending it requires a two-thirds majority in the National Assembly and approval by two-thirds of the state houses of assembly. A flexible constitution is easy to amend. The legislature can change it by passing an ordinary law. The United Kingdom has a flexible constitution. The third classification is unitary and federal. A unitary constitution concentrates power in the central government. Local governments derive their powers from the center. The United Kingdom and France have unitary constitutions. A federal constitution divides power between the central government and regional governments. Nigeria and the United States have federal constitutions. The fourth classification is republican and monarchical. A republican constitution has an elected head of state, usually called a president. A monarchical constitution has a king or queen as head of state. The monarch may have real power or only ceremonial power. The fifth classification is presidential and parliamentary. A presidential constitution has a president who is both head of state and head of government. The president is elected separately from the legislature. The president serves a fixed term. Nigeria and the United States have presidential constitutions. A parliamentary constitution has a prime minister as head of government. The prime minister is a member of the legislature and can be removed by a vote of no confidence. The United Kingdom has a parliamentary constitution. Now let me explain the functions of a constitution. A constitution serves several important functions. The first function is to establish the structure of government. The constitution creates the three arms of government. It defines their powers and their relationships. The second function is to allocate power. The constitution divides power between the central government and regional governments. It also divides power among the three arms. The third function is to limit government power. The constitution sets boundaries on what the government can do. It protects citizens from arbitrary action. The fourth function is to protect the rights of citizens. Most constitutions include a Bill of Rights. This lists the fundamental rights that the government cannot violate. These rights include freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the right to a fair trial. The fifth function is to provide stability. The Constitution establishes the rules for changing the government. Elections are held according to the Constitution. When the rules are clear, there is less chance of conflict. The sixth function is to embody the values of the nation. The Constitution expresses what the nation stands for. It states the goals and aspirations of the people. The seventh function is to serve as the supreme law. All other laws must conform to the Constitution. The Constitution is the standard against which all laws are measured. Now let me explain the sources of a constitution. Where do constitutions come from? The first source is Acts of Parliament. Some parts of a constitution come from ordinary laws passed by the legislature. In an unwritten constitution, this is a major source. The second source is judicial decisions. Courts interpret the Constitution and make rulings that become part of constitutional law. These judicial precedents are a source of the Constitution. The third source is customs and conventions. Some constitutional rules are not written down. They come from tradition and practice. For example, in the United Kingdom, the convention that the monarch must assent to all bills passed by Parliament is not written in any law, but it is followed. The fourth source is the work of constitutional experts. Many constitutions are drafted by constitutional commissions, scholars, and lawyers. The Nigerian constitution was drafted by experts and approved by the government. The fifth source is foreign constitutions. Countries often borrow ideas from other constitutions. The Nigerian constitution borrowed from the United States Constitution, especially the presidential system. The sixth source is historical documents. Documents like the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence have influenced constitutions around the world. The seventh source is international law and treaties. International human rights law has influenced the Bill of Rights in many constitutions. Now, let me explain the difference between a constitution and statute law. A constitution is the supreme law. A statute is an ordinary law passed by the legislature. The constitution is more difficult to change than a statute. The constitution creates the legislature. The legislature cannot change the constitution by itself. In most countries, constitutional amendments require a special procedure. Statutes can be changed by a simple majority vote in the legislature. Any law that contradicts the Constitution is void. The courts have the power to strike down unconstitutional statutes. This is called judicial review. Now let me explain the concept of constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is the principle that government must be limited by a constitution. It is the idea that the government should not have arbitrary power. The government must follow the law. The rights of citizens must be protected. Constitutionalism is not the same as having a constitution. Many countries have constitutions but do not practice constitutionalism. In a dictatorship, there may be a constitution, but the dictator ignores it. Constitutionalism requires that the government actually obey the constitution. It requires an independent judiciary to enforce the constitution. It requires a culture of respect for the law. Constitutionalism is essential for democracy and the rule of law. A common exam question asks you to define a constitution and explain the types of constitutions. Here is a sample answer. A constitution is the fundamental law of a country. The types of constitutions include written and unwritten, rigid and flexible, unitary and federal, republican and monarchical, and presidential and parliamentary. A written constitution is a single document. An unwritten constitution is not codified. A rigid constitution is difficult to amend. A flexible constitution is easy to amend. Each type has advantages and disadvantages. Another exam question asks you to explain the functions of a constitution. Here is your answer. The functions of a constitution include establishing the structure of government, allocating power, limiting government power, protecting the rights of citizens, providing stability, embodying the values of the nation, and serving as the supreme law. Without a constitution, there would be no limit on government power. The constitution is essential for democracy and the rule of law. Another exam question asks you to identify the sources of a constitution. Here is your answer. The sources include acts of parliament, judicial decisions, customs and conventions, the work of constitutional experts, foreign constitutions, historical documents, and international law. These sources come together to form the constitutional framework of a country. No constitution comes from a single source. All constitutions are influenced by many factors. Another exam question asks you to explain the concept of constitutionalism. Here is your answer. Constitutionalism is the principle that government must be limited by a constitution. It means that the government must obey the constitution. The rights of citizens must be protected. An independent judiciary enforces the constitution. Having a constitution is not enough. The government must actually follow it. Constitutionalism is essential for democracy. Without constitutionalism, a constitution is just a piece of paper. Here is what you need to take away. A constitution is the fundamental law of a country. Types include written and unwritten, rigid and flexible, unitary and federal, republican and monarchical, and presidential and parliamentary. Functions include establishing government structure, allocating power, limiting power, protecting rights, providing stability, embodying values, and serving as supreme law. Sources include statutes, judicial decisions, customs, experts, foreign models, historical documents, and international law. Constitutionalism is the principle that government must be limited by the Constitution. Practice these concepts. When you have them down, move to topic 2.